Alright, so I have this scene, it's kind of an old scene that I did years ago, that I'm going to use to show you lighting, or doing the 3-point lighting technique. I have a little base set up for this, you don't need that, and I also have a backdrop, and a backdrop would just be good to have something to rest your object on, so it's not just going to be sitting in nothingness. So for this assignment, you do need to have 3 images that are going to just show you different looks for your object, or rather, like if you could show a front view, you could show a 3/4 view or side view, or just different qualities, or just different sides of your mesh to give us a full, glimpse of everything that you have. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to showcase a 3-point lighting technique that I showcased in class. But so what you can do is, first off, before we do any sort of lighting, we want to have a camera, because we want to light to that camera. So I'll go to Create, Cameras, Camera. Alright, and you should see a camera get made, which is going to be right there. So I'll move this up. It's really tiny, so I can always scale it up to see it. Maybe. I might not be showing cameras, and I'm not, so there it is. Okay. And I want to look through it, so I'll go to Panels, Look Through Selected, and take a glimpse through this camera. And I'm just going to pose this, or essentially move my camera, so that I can get a good shot of what I want this to look like. But I need to be able to see the borders of my frame. So I'm going to go to View, Camera Settings, Resolution Gate, to see the outline of what my camera sees. That is also located right up here. You can, if you just click this button, that'll toggle the resolution gate on and off. Okay? So then I could start framing this a little bit better. I'll do something like this. I think that looks pretty great. And I want to keep that camera where it's located. But I want to be able to keep this view and then not ever move it again, for now at least. But I want to be able to move around and navigate my camera space. So what I'm going to do is go to Panels, Layouts, 2 panes side by side, or there's a little button right here which will split my panels into 2. Okay, so I have my perspective, but I got rid of my camera, which I don't want. So I'm going to go to Panels, Perspective, Camera 1 to change this viewport. And if I just tap 6 on my keyboard, I can see my textures again. But I'm currently getting clipped onto the sides right there. I can't actually see the full extent of my scene. So I'm going to go to View, Camera Settings, Horizontal, which will give me a little bit of buffer. Alright, so now that I have my camera set, I can start adding lights to this scene. So we can create a light by going to Create, Lights, and we're going to take a look at a couple different types of lights. I don't want you using ambient light, and the reason is, I'll just create one really quickly. It's because when you create an ambient light, it looks something like that. If you hit 7 on your keyboard, it's going to light everywhere. Okay? And it's very difficult to control where the light goes. So the key to being a good lighting artist is to essentially be able to control light and just how it's going to hit all facets of your scene. With an ambient light, that's near impossible to do, because you're pretty much going to have to be putting up obstructions, or things that will obstruct where this light is lighting. But it's kind of impossible, because you can even see the back part of this object has illumination, and this light's in the front of it. Okay, so I don't want you using ambient light, just because it's not going to look very realistic. Ambient lights are great if you're trying to do something with cartoons, or something that you're not trying to do something realistic. Okay, so I'm going to delete that light, go back to Create, and we'll look at the light we're going to use for 3-point lighting. We looked at directional lights in class, but those are mostly used for exterior lighting. Okay, I'll scale it up so we can take a look at it. Directional lights are specifically, I tend to use them more for exterior lighting, because they're infinite light sources. So you'll notice that my light is not changing, even though I move this underneath my backdrop. because infinite lights will light infinitely in the direction that it's pointed in. So it's pointed in this direction, so it's going to light infinitely from here all the way down to infinity, up into infinity, in that direction. But if I rotate it, then it'll change the light. So it doesn't actually matter where you have this light. I can have it underneath this backdrop, and it'll still infinitely light in that direction. Okay? You could use this to help light your scene, but I tend to, again, it's kind of like an ambient light. It's difficult to create a scene or essentially like a studio lighting environment when you can't really control where the light goes, because this light is infinitely lighting in the direction I have it pointed in. So I'm not going to use that one either. And the other type of light we have, which we used on our previous assignment, is the point light. And this light, as I mentioned, is kind of like a light bulb. It's omnidirectional, O-M-N-I. And by that, what that means is that it's going to light like a light bulb. And I'm having a difficult time getting my move manipulator up. There we go. It's going to light like a light bulb. Okay? And this is not too bad to use, but again, you're going to have a difficult time controlling where this light goes, because you kind of place it here and it might just, it's going to glow everywhere though. Okay? Could be nice to use, but for this assignment, it's not really going to be one that's going to work out very well. The light that we're going to use a lot more for this assignment is going to be the spotlight. A spotlight, essentially, is what it implies. Okay, as you can kind of see in here, it looks a little bit like, or a lot like, let me make sure I'm in viewport 2.0. Here we go. A spotlight. Okay? And why this is nice is that I can directly see where this light is going, and I can use the attributes over here to say I can narrow the cone angle, which will make the cone smaller or larger. And I can also soften this edge to make this softer, and to make it just seem like it's a pool of light. And I can really isolate where this light is going to go. Okay, if you hit T, as in tiger, on your keyboard, you'll get this show manipulator tool, which will give you 2 manipulators. Okay, and it'll make it a little bit easier to point your spotlight, because I can put this little manipulator at the base of the phone, and then I can lift this and start directing where I want my light to go. So when you're doing a 3-point lighting technique, okay, the very first light you should place is going to be called the key light. Okay, and it's called a key light because it's the key to, I guess, the main light. Okay, it's going to be your main light source. It will also be the light that casts your shadows. And it's also going to be the most intense light, for the most part. Okay, so when you're placing a key light, I'm trying to essentially just get how I want my shininess or the specularity to look on my phone. Just trying to make it look pretty nice. And I can look at it inside my camera here, but I don't have lighting mode or lit mode turned on. So if I hit 7 on my keyboard in this viewport, I can get a better idea of what the light is doing. It looks like I just shot that off into space, so I'll bring this back down, so I can get a decent idea of how this light will look. So I can position this into a way that I feel like will best show my object. And I kind of like this because I like this little shininess right there. I think that looks really great. Might even pick it up a bit. Maybe get it a little. I think that's okay. Okay. I also want to call this key light. It's good to name your lights because we're going to have a few. Okay, and I think I also want to increase the intensity a little bit. Might maybe add a little bit of like orange to it. I like having orange to my key lights, or maybe a blue. And start increasing the light just a scotch, make it pretty bright. Nice. Okay. So the next type of light in a 3-point lighting scenario is going to be the fill light. The fill light is going to assist the areas in which the key light cannot get to, or essentially fill the scene. It usually won't have shadows, and it's going to be not nearly as intense as the key, because if it was as intense, it's going to start flattening out your object. So you're kind of using this to help illuminate parts of your object, but also to help round out the three-dimensional shape. I generally just duplicate my key light when I'm doing this. Okay, and we can select it here. I have my outliner open. We'll call this fill. Okay. I'll hit T on my keyboard, and usually the fill light is going to be about 45 degrees to the other side of your model. Okay, because it's going to be filling the area that your key light can't quite get to. It's not going to be a perfect science. It's kind of very much like a game of guesstimation, of just to make it look right. And this is why it needs to be half as intense, because you see how washed out that's getting? So I need to go into my fill light and tone down the intensity. Something maybe like 0.5 might work out. And I can make it a different color if I wanted to, like a blue. Okay. I can do a lot with this. Just, again, trying to fill the areas, but also not wash it out, because this is starting to get a little washed out in here. I can start pushing this back. Just want to give it some illumination. But in the end, this is not going to be a great understanding of what our object is going to look like. Okay? You really need to be doing a render. So, I'm going to select this camera view, which is my camera 1, go into my render view, or I can just say render the current frame. Okay? And it'll look something like this. Okay? And one thing you'll notice is that it's pretty dim, but I also don't have shadows. Okay? So I'm going to need to do a few things to get shadows. Again, recall that we want shadows to be coming from our key light. Okay? So if I go into the attributes for the key and look up shadows, I don't want you to use depth map shadows, because these are really cheap and fake looking shadows. So if you close this, you'll see underneath there we do have ray trace shadows, and they are checked on, so it is telling us that we have ray trace shadows, or we have shadows. But why don't I see anything in my render? Okay, that's going to be because in the render settings we have to enable ray tracing to see ray trace shadows, and by default Maya keeps that off because it's an expensive thing to use overall. So inside my render settings, which is going to be that little clapper right there, you need to go to the Maya software tab, and under ray tracing quality, check on ray tracing. And while I'm in here, you see how it says that my quality is set to low, or edge anti-aliasing quality is set to low? I'm going to change this quality to production, which will max out my settings and make this look a whole lot nicer. Okay? So now, when I do a render, I'm going to keep this image right here. This is a keep image button, which will keep my current render. So when I render again, it'll take a little bit longer because now it's using ray tracing. But I also have reflections, shadows, okay, and the line quality is a bit better. You see how it's a little bit rough right there? Now it's much smoother. Okay. So now that I have this, I could start actually looking at my lighting a little bit differently, and I could start to judge exactly the intensity and the placement that I want to have. Okay. So I'm going to start just fussing with some of these settings a little bit, and let's try and get my lights a little bit more how I want them. So I might raise this up a tad, and I can go back to my render view, and I could do another render. Okay. I should have saved the last image, so if I save this, I think I want to increase the intensity to maybe like 0.7. Go back to render view, and I made sure I save this and say render. So when I do a comparison, you can see it got a little bit brighter. Great. But it's also casting shadows, which I do not want. I don't want to have all these shadows going everywhere. So for my fill light, I'm going to turn off ray trace shadows. So I'll again keep this image and do a comparison, render. So I don't have a shadow there anymore. And it's also made some of this a little bit less dark. Great. Alright, so the next light that we're going to have in our 3-point lighting system is going to be the backlight. And I tend to use the backlight to help get out or separate this from the darkness or the background. Okay, so just like before, I'm going to duplicate one of my lights. It can be the fill or the key. I typically do the fill because I've already turned shadows off for it. Because you also don't want your backlight to have shadows. So then, whoops, I renamed the wrong one, so this should be fill. And this one is going to be the back. Your backlight is usually going to be opposite your key. Okay. And I try to kind of help me, again, like separate out like an edge up here. So I might actually bring this further down and sometimes a little bit up. So I can get that nice little kick right there. So sometimes in order to see it a little bit better, I might change the color to like a bright pink. Okay. I'm going to keep this image, and I do that so I can better see what it's doing in my render. Because in my viewport, so that's too much backlight. You see it's kind of like really going all over the place there. So what I'll do is I could just start scooching this backwards, perhaps. Okay, let's try. Because I'm really just kind of wanting this. So, in the end, like I also need to get something on the top there, because you see how that's kind of just fading into the background. So, just because it's called a 3-point lighting technique doesn't mean you only need to have 3 lights. Because I can have numerous lights to help me get the look that I'm going for. That's kind of nice. I'm going to make this now a lightish blue. That's kind of nice. So maybe I duplicate this one. Okay. I moved my fill light on accident. Well, we'll just switch the names. Not a big deal. Okay. So then we'll duplicate this one. And I could kind of move it over. Again, I'm just trying to kind of get this to separate a bit. Okay. There we go. Getting close. Just keep doing some test renders. Okay, so not really a big fan of that. I think I wanted it to be a little bit more on this edge, and that's I'm kind of like ticking it around, trying to find a good edge right there. And that is usually, this might take a little while. Like it may not be as easy as just kind of point and shooting. I could try also adjusting the drop off a bit, the cone angle, narrow it or widen it. Make sure I was doing it on the wrong thing again. See, it says fill light, gotta double click. Okay. So I'm kind of getting there. I feel like there's some more I want to do over here, but what I also want to show you is like getting some color in this background. Okay. So I can come up in here with my fill light, okay, and I can duplicate it. And I'm going to use this to get some color into this background. Like I can come back here and let's just focus on getting to some background colors, right? Like I can come here and let's see if I can increase the penumbra a bit. Let's open up the cone and increase this color. Let's try making this like a orange. Okay, make sure this is set to viewport 2.0. Oops. Okay, I'm kind of just mostly trying to point at the background and not so much the actual object. Okay, starting to get some light back there. I can have some fun with the colors I mentioned. I can make it, what if I made this red in the background? See, I don't want to get too much on there, but if I render it, let's keep this image and see if how much of it I'm touching. Okay, it's getting a little too red, so I'll position this a little bit more directly in the background, and maybe adjust this so it won't really touch this too much. I keep adjusting. That was my bad. I forgot I have this locked. So let me fix some of this really fast. Alright. Duplicate the fill. Now it says fill 1. So now we should be good. There we go. I was wondering why I wasn't getting any good changes. Or the changes that I wanted, rather. It was looking really weird. Let's do that red one more time. Okay, I'm back here. There we go, getting some color back there. And I can duplicate this. Okay, and I'll just do an opposite direction. Get this side. And maybe make this. I'm just kind of picking colors. I'm having some just fun with it. Going like with opposing color selections. See how that goes. Okay, and again I can kind of keep on working some of this out, mostly in the backlight, but the idea again is that you want to be getting some contour to your objects, and that's a lot of reflection on there, so I might have to lower some reflectivity on my materials. I think I made it entirely too reflective, so if I tone this down, we can look at this, we'll keep that image. It's going to be a little bit less reflective, so I can actually start seeing some stuff a little bit better. Alright, so once you're done with this, okay, you're going to say I'm happy with this render here. I'll say File, Save Image. Okay, and you want to make sure you change your file type to JPEG, and you can just say your last name, first name, image1. Save. Okay, but you need to do 3, so it would suck to have to do 3 different lighting scenarios. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lights and my backdrop, okay, and I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to group them together. Okay. And then what you can do is you can use them to rotate everything. Okay. And so let's say I rotate this along the back side here, like that. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my camera, so I'll go to my camera view and just do that. Something like that. Right there. Pose it or position it how I like it. Something like that. And then come back in, render. Okay, clearly didn't finish the back. Then that's number 2. File, Save Image. Just select that. Image 2, save. And I can pick another angle that I can say select this group, rotate it, and work on getting like good lighting out of it. So maybe that one. Cool. File, Save Image. 3. And that's it.